strategy formulation, and external analysis. So when we're looking at doing external analysis, we can either look at the generic or general environment, and we can look at the industry environment. So an external analysis generally just looks at anything outside of the organization. And when we talk about the general environment analysis, what we do most often is either part of a SWOT looking at the opportunities and threats, or more specifically, using a pestle analysis. So a pestle analysis looks at the political factors, the economic factors, the social factors, technological factors, environmental factors, as well as legal factors. And these all exist in the general environment. We need to be aware of them as an organization, but obviously we cannot control them, but we can be aware of them and then think about how we are responding to them if they impact us. So that is a general environment analysis. We also have Michael Porter's 5 forces analysis that looks more closely at how we analyze the industry that we are in. So this model really looks at analyzing the attractiveness of an industry by thinking about these 5 different forces that you see here. You see barriers to entry and the threat of potential new entrants. You have buyer power, supplier power, threat from substitutes, and you also have rivalry among the industry competitors. And that is the one in orange to the left. So these 5 forces tells us how we may or may not be turning up profitability depending on what our competitors are doing and how we are positioned in relation to them. So the rivalry among industry competitors is the degree of competition between the existing firms in this specific industry. And we are breaking down on the next 3 slides how we can look at the degree of competition among all of these existing firms based on 6 different factors. So we're going to talk about those in a little bit. So on this slide, we are talking about the middle blue column here. So new entrants, right? So new entrants into the industry. If we have high barriers to entry, it's a costly industry to enter. You need a lot of equipment, you need specialized workforce, whatever the barriers to entry are. We tend to have less new competitors or less new entrants into the industry. We do know that companies have generally a really hard time to look outside of their industry and say who can possibly be coming into our industry. So it's very, very hard for companies to identify new competitors. It's typically not on their horizon, but it's something to keep in mind for sure. We also have buyer as well as supplier power. So buyers are the ones that are buying from us. It doesn't necessarily mean that we have a final customer. We can be part of a chain that is selling things from start to finish to final customer. So buyer is just whoever is buying product or service from us. And if we have a strong buyer, they have a lot more power, and so they can demand lower prices from us. Walmart is so well known being a buyer of all of the items and products that they sell in their stores, that they can negotiate extremely low prices from Huggies selling diapers or from Pantene selling hair shampoo. So Walmart is a very strong buyer, has a lot of buyer power against the manufacturers that produce the items that Walmart sells. We also have supplier power. So the suppliers are the individuals that supply us with items. So if they have more power, it means that they can actually determine terms and conditions, and it's harder for us to actually make a profit. Finally, we have substitutes. Substitutes are competitors that are from outside a similar industry. So they're not in our industry, but they are in a different industry and they compete with us. So for instance, if you are a grocery store, you would have other grocery stores be your competitors in the industry you're in. And you might have substitutes from an outside similar industry, which can be fast food. So fast food is not your industry, but you can lose grocery store customers to the fast food stores. And so in this instance, the fast food stores would be a substitute to the grocery store industry. So looking at the rivalry in the five forces framework gives us these six prominent factors that we know can either increase or decrease the intensity of the rivalry among competitors in one industry. So the first one is numerous or equally balanced competitors. So, depending on the number of competitors within your industry and the size or power among them, meaning are they equally or unequally balanced, will either increase or decrease your competition. So, the example here is the Coca-Cola and Pepsi. So, we have two large rivalries in the soda business. And so they are similarly sized and they compete head to head, and they have for years and decades. So equally balanced competitors. The second one is slow industry growth. So if a market is not growing, we tend to have more rivalry because there's just no growth. So where are you getting your new customers from? So when we have these slow growth markets, we see more intense competition. The third one is fixed costs or storage costs that are too high for the organizations. So when we have very high fixed cost or storage costs, meaning we have these type of costs regardless of whether we sell product or service, what organizations often try to do is they try to produce more so that for each item or service produced, that fixed cost is reduced. So if you have a fixed cost of 1,000, it's better for you to sell 4,000 than 500, because if you spread out the fixed cost among all of the items produced, you're better off. But the problem is in industries where we have this high fixed costs, every organization will try to produce more output. If we produce more output, we saturate the market, and then we end up with lower levels of price because the customer can demand a lower price because the supply is so high. Okay, fourth one is the lack of differentiation or low switching costs, meaning if you don't provide anything unique, you're just a commodity. And if you're a commodity, I don't have to be loyal to you. So as long as your product or service provides something unique, I'm willing to come back to you and stay loyal. But if I perceive you to be a commodity, then by all means, I'm not sticking with you. I'm going with whoever provides the lower cost or higher levels of service, or a combination of the two. The fifth one is high strategic stakes. So when we see rivalry being very high when it is important for the competitors to perform well in the industry that they're in. So this can be in a specific geographic location or something else where we are bound by something. And so if we're bound by something, we have higher strategic stakes because competition becomes higher in that sense. The sixth one is high exit barriers. So sometimes we might just not be able to afford to leave the industry. And so even though we're not really turning a profit to the extent that we should be doing with our investments, the exit of the industry is so high that we end up staying with it. So these six factors, looking at rivalry among competitors within an industry, can basically be boiled down to these two columns here. On the left side, you see whether or not you're likely to profit, and on the right side, you see the challenges to profit. So you can look at these questions, right? Is the industry difficult to enter? You're more likely to make a profit because you don't have new entrants. Is there limited rivalry? It's better off for you. You don't have as many competitors. Are buyers and suppliers weak? That's good for you as an organization. Few substitutes is even better because your customers can't go anywhere else. Challenges to profit exist when it's easy to enter the industry, and we have a high degree of rivalry. The buyers and suppliers are strong, and it's very easy to switch to other alternatives for the customer. So, discussion questions for you to reflect on are looking at the pestle analysis, right? So what are the 6 dimensions? Do you feel or find some or all or a few of these 6 pestle dimensions to be more important, and why? Look at the 5 forces referred to in the Porter 5 forces framework, and then what do you think about the 5 forces model? Is there anything that you think should be in there that Porter missed to put in? Finally, the strategy diamond, you can just take a look at this slide. It focuses on arenas, staging and pacing, economic logic, differentiation, and vehicles. And all of these 5 factors in the strategy diamond are listed by the questions that are in here. So answering all of these questions would allow us to be better positioned with our strategy, making us more competitive in the industry. So the strategy diamond is really just a framework with these 5 factors that tells us what is really the content of our strategy, and how can we go about thinking about that.